Well, we are back for another edition of Sunday Night AstroLive. And I am your Sunday Night Astro liver, Robert Phoenix, still dealing with living in the liminal. How is everybody? I hope you are having or have had. I feel like I'm between worlds. A good weekend, a great weekend, perhaps. Could you have a great weekend? Could you have a great day? Could you have a great life? And what would that look like? Would it always be sunshine and rainbows and chock full of grace, or will you take every experience that comes your way and live it to the fullest, whatever it may be? And for some people, you never know. Living that experience to the fullest could mean ultimately bottoming out, right? Or it could be succeeding beyond your wildest dreams and expectations. What a great place to experience the breadth of all of that than right here in Classroom Earth, right? The cosmic matrix, where nothing is as it seems to be or appears to be. And we're going to get a lot more of that moving forward. I'm just putting you guys on notice. It's gonna be weirdly serendipitous and also strangely synchronous in many regards. We'll get into more of that, what I mean by that, a little bit later. We are going to dive into this upcoming Mars-Uranus conjunction, which, wow, right? So a lot of people are saying doom is on, right? This is a doom on conjunction. Maybe we'll explore what that means and how, when we really get into the nooks and crannies of Aquarian energy and Uranian energy, nothing is what it appears to be. Nothing. And just when you think something looks a certain way and breaks a certain way, you go, aha, this is it, right? We've stumbled across, fill in the blank. Truth, validation, whatever, right? With Uranian and Aquarian energy, what happens is that usually it flips again, and then it flips again, and it flips again. And what it does is it keeps us on our toes. So we don't have a lot of expectations. And this is one of the things that I think is resonant with the Aquarian vibration, is detachment. Not to be so fully detached that you can't live your life, but you step back and go, okay, give this 30 minutes or give this a week, and let's see how this turns out, right? So for all of you people out there that are like to go down rabbit holes, connect dots, decode, I think you're going to have plenty of things to do that with in this next brief cycle. Let's go with this Mars cycle, right? Because we have a lot of changes going on, right? Mars is getting ready to do its thing in Gemini and then conjunct with Uranus. That's number one. We've got a Mercury retrograde on its way. That's number two. We got a full moon tomorrow night in Capricorn. That's number three. And then we have the aforementioned, in the thumbnail, ingress of Jupiter to Leo, which happens on July 1st. So I'm going to take most of the show to talk about Jupiter in Leo, because I don't know if I'll be doing a show on July 5th. That's a Sunday night, right? And I don't plan. Okay, so I'm not going to be in Texas on Sunday night. I'm just going to leave it there, right? I'm going on an undisclosed timeout for a while, 4 days, and I'm not sure what I'm getting into. Let's just put it that way, right? I'm not sure what I'm getting into. It's not terrible, but it sounded good when I thought about it, and now thinking about it, I'm like, what am I getting into? But hey, it's America's 250th birthday. And you know that President Trump's going to pull out all the stops here to have the biggest party, the best party, the most awesome party of all time. I don't know about that. But for him and all the people around him, I'm sure they will. I'm sure they'll celebrate till the cows come home, if there were cows to come home to, or a home for the cows to come to. You know what I mean, right? Anyway, we're going to get into Jupiter and Leo tonight, and what we can expect, and go through the last Jupiter cycle, which was around in 2014. So we'll go back in time. We'll look at some key events that took place in 2014, which is what we do with astrology. We go back, we look at previous cycles, we see what went down, and we can kind of get a glimpse as to maybe perhaps what is coming during this cycle as well. Okay, so before I get into that, I think I'll just do some quick housekeeping and business. By the way, thank you for being here and waiting patiently for the show to start, about 45 minutes later than it normally does. It was just trying to get it together. I was trying to get it together, man. I saw Jeff Bridges. He did an interview with Theo Vaughn, and he was talking about the Big Lebowski and how no matter if he's watching TV and the Big Lebowski comes on, he always watches it. He says, "I'll just watch a little bit of it so I can see this one scene with John or something like that, like John Goodman," and he winds up watching the whole movie. Right? That's how fond he is of the Big Lebowski, and he wound up writing this book with this Jewish Zen monk, and it was all these sort of dudisms about the dude, and the dude being like this Zen master of sorts. I thought that was a very interesting aside to that interview. I have no idea where I'm going with this, except that the dude reminds me of Jupiter and Leo. He reminds me of Jupiter and Leo. Why? Because Leo is youth and it's recreational activities. So what is the dude into? He's into bowling, right? That's a very Leo sport, by the way. That's what we do in the fifth house. That's a sport of pastimes, right? And bowling is a constant in the Big Lebowski. So check that box with Jupiter and Leo. At least, well, the dude, right? The dude is being very Jupiter. Why don't we take a look at the dude? How about a little, for some of you people out there, you may say, I don't know anybody who hasn't seen the Big Lebowski. I don't. But in case you haven't, let me just refresh your memory, or at least have you become familiarized with the dude and the Big Lebowski, and why I think Jupiter and Leo is Big Lebowski energy. All right, here we go. All right, so this is this is a great dude picture here. Beautiful. All right, so this is our first visual of the night, right here with Jeffrey Lebowski, aka the dude. And let's see if we can get is that a good resolution? It's probably gonna be black. First one's always black. Let me go back to, of course it is. So we'll stop sharing, and then, oh yeah, I was gonna do some business. Now I'm talking now. All right, hold on. There we go. So this is, oh man, it's too small. Damn it. All right, hold on. Let me get back. Give me back here. Give me 1 second. And here we go. Let's see. Yeah, this should be better right here. Same photo. There we go. Ah, that's more like it. That is more like it. Okay, so here we go. If you're not familiar with the dude in The Big Lebowski, this is what Jeff Bridges looks like. Well, the first thing that we notice is that he has long hair, right? Which is very Leo. Very Leo. And the other thing we notice about The Big Lebowski, or Jeff Lebowski, aka the dude or El Duderino, is that he doesn't grow up. He is frozen in time. His biggest accomplishment was being a part of some protest group at the University of Michigan. I think it was called the Michigan Six or something like that. And they wrote some sort of manifesto or demands to the dean. And that was kind of where he stopped growing, right? No visual means of employment, but doing everything in his power to stay roughly 25 forever. And for me, in some ways, that really encapsulates, in many ways, that really encapsulates Jupiter and Leo, right? Because what Jupiter does is it expands the child in us, right? Leo rules children, whether they're external children or the beloved inner child in each of us, right? So this is the season of the expansion of this idea and archetype and expression of children and childlike versus childish, although sometimes a Jupiter and Leo, right, we can throw a pretty damn good temper tantrum because it takes us back to how many of you out there, by the way, we've all done this at least one time, where you just had the most miserable temper tantrum in your life when you were a kid? Just the meltdown. The absolute meltdown. I remember mine. I was in a toy store. First of all, note to parent, do not take your child into a toy store unless you're willing to buy a toy. That was really irresponsible behavior on my parents' part. What the fuck were they thinking? Right here, let's go into C's Candy. Let's look at the candies. Don't they look delicious? Okay, we can go now. Like, you don't take a kid into a toy store because it's crack, right? It's crack. I know it's been a while since you've been a kid, but don't take them. Parents, if you take your kid, do toy stores even exist anymore? That's another thing. I don't even know if they exist. The saddest fucking thing is seeing an abandoned Toys R Us store. Are they still around? The abandoned ones? Remember go to Toys R Us? This is some Jupiter Leo shit. Remember going to Toys R Us in general? Oh, it was like Valhalla. Absolute Valhalla. I remember going to Toys R Us. Okay, you got $20 worth. Okay, I'm going to spend my money. How am I going to spend my money? Okay, how much is it? And I'd walk up and down those fucking aisles for an hour, just calculating in my head where am I going to get the most bang for my buck, right? Toys R Us, gone. Obliterated. So, I don't know. Is there a toy? I think there may be a toy store in this town. I guess if you want to go get toys, you go to Walmart or someplace like that. Right? I guess they're all embedded in these brick and mortars. But yeah, you just don't take your kid to a toy store and tell them, yeah. How about a kazoo? Yeah, how about a kazoo? Yeah. No, it was cruelty. Cruelty, I tell you. So I was really big into Hot Wheels. That was my thing. And I found a really rare Hot Wheel. I was a fucking collector, okay? I was a collector. I found a rare Hot Wheel. I didn't even remember. I remember the Hot Wheel. It was, if I'm not mistaken, the Jack Rabbit Special, which was whenever I raced my Hot Wheels, that was always my winning car, that Jack Rabbit Special. It was great. And I found it at this one toy store, and I was not going to leave that toy store without the fucking Jack Rabbit Special. Okay? Not. So what do you do? Like, remember when you were a kid, you go to your parents, Mom, Dad, would you mind if I got this? Could you get this? Right? You always start with the most reasonable approach. Right? And it was like, let's restart. That's not where it ended. And I melted down. I melted the fuck down. But you know what? I got the damn Hot Wheel. Now, was I too old to melt down? Probably. I was probably maybe 10 or 11 years old. Maybe 10. Maybe 11, 10, 10. Too old for a meltdown. But I melted down. I got the Hot Wheel. And was I willing to suffer the slings and arrows of feeling dishonorable and my parents feeling disgusted with me in that moment? The answer was yes, I was. I know, I'm sure the more reasonable approach would have been, if I were to do some things around the house, what would those activities be that would allow me to have you purchase this Hot Wheel for me? I just didn't have those skills. Not in that moment. I went right down to my first and second chakra, and wanted that Hot Wheel. And so I went with the quickest, most available technology meltdown. But we get that, right? That is Leo in excess. That is not necessarily a great expression of Leo. And look, we've been parents too. I've been on the other side of that with my son. And I got his meltdown. And it's like almost everything I ever did with my parents came back around again, which is, I think about it, it's absolutely, utterly remarkable and scary. With the exception of my parents wound up staying together. And obviously with my son, he and his mother, and I did not. So that's the main difference. But there was a lot in between that was very similar. Now, what is a better expression of Jupiter and Virgo? Well, we'll get into that. All right. Since I got sidetracked a little bit and shared a little bit of my ugly, spoiled little 10-year-old self who's not leaving the toy store. But it wasn't my fault. It was not my fault. It's like taking an alcoholic into a liquor store, right? And you can't expect the alcoholic to not break down in the liquor store if they're not recovered or saved or whatever. By the way, speaking of recovery, I really want to recommend Billy Corgan's interview with Paul Williams. It's a great, great, great interview. Great interview. And I've really come to enjoy Billy Corgan's channel and his interviews with people from not just the music business, but entertainment as well. So, but that Paul Williams interview is really, really special. Really, really special. And I don't want to ruin it for you, but you got to sit through it all the way to the end. All the way to the end. I had a very interesting synchronicity moment with the Billy Corgan interview with Rick Springfield. In fact, yesterday was a day that was filled with synchronicities. I don't know if anybody else was surfing on the synchronicity wave, but I certainly was. And at one point, I'm watching I'm looking at Billy Corgan and I'm looking at Rick Springfield. And then I say, Billy Corgan reminds me of Carl Jung. Like there was something in that moment where Billy Corgan reminded me of Carl Jung. And less than 5 minutes later, Rick Springfield starts talking about Carl Jung and how he was in a very dark phase of his life, and Jungian therapy was able to help him get through it. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then later on, we went to this party with some good friends of ours in Wimberley. And I was talking with this guy. He's a really interesting character, very interesting character. And I was telling him about how when there were when England migrated to this country, right, back in the day, there wasn't just one England that moved to America. There were 4 Englands. There were the Puritans that were in like New York, Massachusetts, like that area, right? Which eventually became the abolitionists. You have people from Southern England who moved to the southern part of the United States, and they're called the Cavaliers. And they had always had a contentious relationship with the quote unquote pilgrims or the Londoners, who were more liberal, right? These people were landowners. They were used to having indentured servants on their land, i.e. the Welsh, Irish, and occasionally the random Scot, right? So when they got to the South, again, theoretically, that was a system that they were familiar with and employed. You have another group of the English who were kind of from the Midlands, right? And they're the Quakers, and they settle more in like Pennsylvania, and they become industrialists. Quite interesting. And then you have the Scots, the Highland Scots, that come, and they're wahoos. They're like totally crazy fuckers, right? And they settle along the Appalachian Ridge. And so these are the 4 Englands that moved to this country. And so I'm having this discussion with this guy at this party last night, and he says, "Oh man," he says, "Yeah, that's Cavalier country. That's where my wife is from. She, oh yeah, she was talking about this." And so we go inside later, right? And his wife is lovely. These are people that I know. I bounce off of them in this environment, and she was there, and we started to talk about the 4 Englands. And she said, "That's what I was telling you. I was talking to you about that this morning." Right. So she had heard the same podcast that I had heard about. It's a really, really interesting, not just premise, right? It's an actual fact. And she said, "That's what I was telling you. That's what I was telling you." And he said, "Yeah, but he told it to be better." I can't believe he said that. He said, "He told it to be better." Like, he got to the point. I understood him. He looks at me and says, she just keeps going on and on and on. That's when you know that people have been married for a while, when they can like talk to each other like that, and it's not gonna like wind up with somebody having a glass of wine like thrown into their face, right? So yesterday was a day of synchronicities, and anyway. Alyssa Ayers is checking in. What does she have? She says, "I recently found out my family were Puritans from 1630. I was disappointed. I thought we were Scottish." Well, the Scots were crazy, right? The Scots were fucking crazy. The Puritans become the Boston Brahmins and the Blue Bloods, right? That's who the Puritans are. They're the ones who are like socially liberal. And today's liberal class is born out of the Puritans that basically are in Massachusetts and New York, around that area, right? I'm trying to figure out maybe a little bit New Jersey, maybe a little bit Connecticut, like that would be your Delaware. That's your Puritan group, right? The Quakers they settled in like Pennsylvania, Ohio, a little bit later on, maybe the upper tip of Virginia, maybe the upper tip of Kentucky, there's that bit of that overlap, right? But then the Cavaliers are, they're all sort of south of the Mason-Dixon line for the most part, right? So it's a really interesting time in America, and eventually those rivalries and those clashes heat up once again in the United States in the form of the Civil War, which is not just a war that's taking place here, but it's also bringing to the theoretical battlefield the historical relationship between those two groups as well. So it's really fascinating. The Scots are wild. They're fucking wild, right? They're like, we don't want any really heavy duty, strict government ruling over us. So we're going to go into the, hardcore places of the Appalachians, and we're going to go crazy, right? Because they're wild. Like, they're still wild to this day. There's a very untamable group of people, right? Anyway, it's interesting to think about that. And it was definitely part of the synchronicity sort of thing that I was on. It was like a big one yesterday. I loved FAO Schwartz as a kid. Yeah. We didn't have that, but I went to a couple when I was a kid. Of course, there was ubiquitous Toys R Us. So that's, we'll get back to this. Let me take care of some business and welcome the show. And we'll run this thing out for about 2 hours tonight. And then you guys can jump back into your Sunday. We can do it anytime you want. You don't have to stick around. You say, I'm tired of listening to this guy. I'll go do something else. Watch a vitally important World Cup match or something like that. So first of all, the book is out and people are actually purchasing the book. And if you haven't seen the book, let me bring it up here. We'll go to Amazon. And we're real excited about some of the things that we'll be doing with the book, including kind of going on some mini tours with it. And hopefully look at that. Pops right up now. You just type it in. It just pops right up. There it is. Here we go. There it is. It's right there. The Celestial Blueprint, an evolutionary guide to reading your stars. There it is. And the foreword by our good friend, David the Leo King Palmer. And he did a fantastic job. Our other good friend, Mario Garza from Symbolic Studies, with the cover and going in for an actual, we've worked on this together. We're like an actual blueprint vibe, right? And Mario is so talented. I was really, really very fortunate to acquire his services. Here's the back cover right there. That's me with the Easter Island head here in Kerrville, and we have a little quote there from our friend Dr. Narco Longo, also known as Connor, right? And also Evan Nathaniel Graham. We got some nice words from both of them. So that's the back cover right there. And that's available on Amazon. And the hardcover should be coming really soon. Now, you got to follow the author. I'll follow Bruce. But Bruce is, I'm the author of this too. Now we got to, Bruce, you're not the author. We got to clear that up, right? Mr. Robert Phoenix. Bruce is the publisher. He is the publisher. We got to get this. We got to get this taken care of, which we will. Anyway, there you go. It's available right there. See, Jupiter Leo's kicking his like, I wrote that fucking book. That's my book. I'm the author. I love Bruce. He published a book. He's not the author. I'm just telling you, Jupiter Leo, lots of pitfalls. Right? You gotta share the sunshine. Sunshine's available for all of us. Yeah, we'll change that. Anyway, it's there. It's available. Also, I think the link for locals is there, and you can go and sign up for locals. The Monday after July 4th, I'll be doing a Monday night locals where we're going to go through like basic astrology. And I'm going to do that for 3 months. So for those of you who want to learn about astrology and you you get the book, you get the course, whatever. I'll be that guy for 3 months. Okay, 3 months. And this is not behind a paywall, right? This is on Locals. You can go there. You can sign up for free. So I'll be there 90 minutes, 2 hours, Monday night, and then the following, not the following, but the one after. So every other Monday night for 3 months, that's what I'll be doing. And you're welcome to come to all of them, right? And I'll be able to answer your questions to the best of my ability. And then by the time we're done, you should be up to speed, especially if you get the book and the course. And this is my way of giving back to you and reigniting our community over there on Locals. Okay. We got True Hemp Science, of course.com, who is the provider of True Hemp Science. Some of the best CBD you will find on the internet or off, all organically sourced. Go there, first time purchase, 20% off. Type in 15MINS, and you will get a goodie bag on top of your order. So there you go. All right, I think that's all the business that I have to take care of for now. Okay. All right. So let's go back to the show. Well, we're still in the show, but the other part of the show. So why don't we look at where we are? And I'm kind of going ahead a little bit. I'm going to use tomorrow's chart for the full moon. So why don't we look at the full moon, and we get our celestial bearings, and then we'll transition from the full moon, and we'll get into some Jupiter and Leo, and then we'll get into the 4th of July, which is a very interesting astrological day, and it encompasses a lot of the things that we're talking about, right? The Monday, week after the 4th, yeah. That's when I'll be doing the Locals. So not the Monday after the 4th, but the week after. So that would be, let's see, so the 4th is what, Saturday, 5th is Sunday, 6th is Monday, so that'd be the 13th, right? I believe it'd be the 13th. So July 13th, join us on Locals. And then the next one would be 2 weeks after that, right? So it'd be every 2 weeks. Okay. All right. We're good. I think we got it. So let's do this. Full moon. Let's bring up the full moon. Let's see. All right. You know, I'm really tempted to talk about sports tonight, and I know you guys don't want me to do that. But at some point, I got to just talk about Brandon Ayuk and Pisces. I have to talk about it. I'm not sure if tonight's the right night, but we are watching one of the great Piscean crash outs of all time in pro sports. I mean, of all time. This thing is freaking epic. I'm not sure I'm ready to go there yet, but at some point I need to address it. Okay. So this is called the buck moon. The buck moon. I guess it's because of the bucks, right? The bucks. Horns. Vital. Deer antler. Elk antler. Musk. Remember Musk? Not the guy, but the musk, the thing you would, the cologne. I used to wear that shit. All right, so let's get into this. And let's make this a little bit bigger. Whoop, not that big. Whoa. We're going the other way. Whoop, there we go. All right. Let's zoom in. Okay. So here we are. We will have the full moon At 7:56, the full moon will be visible at 7. The full moon will enter its full phase at 7:56 p.m. Oh, you know what? Fuck, that's a wrong moon. That's the right moon. Sorry. On June 29th, 2026. I'm thinking, man, I'm already in July. No, it's June, Robert. June 29th, 2026. All right, there's our full moon in Capricorn. Now, this is a funny moon, right? So we're in this really sort of polar opposition because the moon likes to be in the opposite sign. It likes to be in Cancer. So here we have the moon in what? We have the moon in its detriment because it is in rulership in Cancer. So it's in its detriment here. And it's not the best position for the moon. And by and large, the energy in general, just being honest here, I'm not a huge fan of. I'm just, not a huge fan of the energy coming at us, right? Why is that? It reminds me of being the kid in the toy store again, and my Capricornian parents saying no, right? And being so emotionally attached to this object that was not going to leave that toy store without it being clutched between my hands. That's what it reminds me of. The Capricorn moon is really good at saying no. No, 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 no. Want another slice of cake? No. That's a good version of the Capricorn moon. Want another drink before you take off? No. Good. Depending on what you're drinking, obviously, but you know what I'm talking about, drink, right? Like, it's an adult moon, the Capricorn moon. But here we are, we're just kicking into summer, and that moon, that Jupiter in Cancer, which is, by the way, trining Mars, which has just entered Gemini, which we'll talk about, can't wait till it gets to Leo, which it will on July 1st. We're still a few days away. Don't jump the shark or the gun, for that matter. So there's a lot of, I would say, anticipation, but there are energies here that are very different than the moon and sun opposition. And then, of course, squaring off early against Neptune, which it will, moving in later and coming in and squaring Saturn, right? So tomorrow, going into tomorrow night, that moon, tomorrow night and even Tuesday morning, emotionally, I think could be a bit tricky because there's like two separate emotional waves going on. There's this one, think of it as like weather fronts. What happens when you get a cold front clashing into a warm front? Yeah, it gets pretty explosive in the sky, doesn't it? We get thunder, we get lightning, we get rapid changes of temperature. We can get hail. I've been in those situations where it's gone from like 95 to like 70 in a matter of 45 minutes. And then the outcome of that is absolutely, utterly dramatic, right? So in many ways, that's what we have going on here, but at a different level, right? Now, this could result in the same manifestation or application to regular old barometric weather. I mean, obviously, we do talk about the astrological weather, and sometimes there is a correspondence. Keep your eye on Jupiter and Leo again for the summertime. I think we're in for a very hot summer. I mean, I think that goes already in France. They're having record-breaking temperatures that they haven't dealt with for a while. But again, very much connected to a previous Jupiter cycle where France had experienced something very similar along these lines at this point of Jupiter. I think it was the previous Jupiter transit in Cancer, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a really interesting period, right? Just tomorrow alone, because people want to get on with. Let me just throw this out there as a general concept, right? People are tired, right? And I say tired, I don't even mean physically tired. I mean, people are like just fucking sick and tired. You know, they're sick and tired of, are we still at war with Iran? You know, what's going on with the Straits of Hormuz? Who's running it? Oman, Iran? Are we? Is Israel still attacking Lebanon? What the fuck is going on, right? And one day it looks like it's going to be resolved, and the next day Israel's bombing southern Lebanon, and then J.D. Vance is getting ghosted in Pakistan, and it's like all these things are happening, and it seems it's only been going on since February 25th, right? But it seems like we've reached this point. You know, when I was a kid, the Vietnam War, I started watching the Vietnam War on TV probably around 1965. That's my first sort of recollection of it. And that shit lasted until I was like 12 or 13 years old. You know, Nixon gets impeached in 72. I'm 14, and he's winding down the war roughly in 73. It lasts 8 years. 8 years of my life was spent with the Vietnam War always in the background. And I know for a lot of you who were older, that meant something a lot different. Like the stakes of living through that time, being older, were much higher because obviously you could be drafted. And if you weren't one of those people, then that could have been your brother, or it could have been your husband, or it could have been your son. So it wasn't just the individual that was impacted, but it was families as well, right? So in that regard, I was kind of lucky, but it was a weird thing to grow up with, right? Like in some ways, like that was my World War II as a child. 8 years. Now, I'm not saying that this thing with Iran has lasted 8 years, but it sure feels like it. It feels like it's been going on forever, right? We're in this weird distortion of time. And it's only been going on since February 25th. And yet, because it gets elongated and then pushed back in and elongated and pushed back in, and it's not linear, right? There's always a sense of, okay, we're done, we're going to move on, blah, blah, blah. And then something happens. And we've trained ourselves in a lot of ways to not have any expectations around anything. And in this regard, I think this Capricorn moon can be helpful, right? In this regard, the Capricorn moon is like, no, don't buy it. Don't believe it. Don't get your hopes up. That's the Capricorn moon. And yet, over here, again, this little sub-cycle is like, we're over it. We're over a lot of shit, right? We're over a lot. Like, we're over that fucking war, okay? We're over of the accordion effect with that war. We're over it. We're done. At least on a certain level we are. Maybe some of you aren't. Maybe some of you are into it. Maybe you've got Iran war trading cards or something like that. You get your first edition Pete Hegseth trading card, Mario Rubio trading card. I don't know anybody that's like that, but there are people that are like that. They're into it. They're going to smash that regime. Free those people. But we're over it. What else? What else are we over? We're just over bullshit, right? We're over bullshit. You know, we're over like specialized groups, small specialized groups, complaining about their status in society, right? That ship has sailed. Like, I would say to a T, most people are over this. Was it ever interesting? Not really. It might have been interesting for small segmented groups, but we're kind of over it. Like, there's been this huge blowback from the San Francisco Giants when they had Pride Night. And they had some guys on the team who, instead of not wearing the pride cap, which they could have chosen, they decided to put the Bible verse because the pride symbol was the SF Giants logo with a rainbow, and they put the Genesis quote in there about the rainbow and finding the rainbow, and the rainbow being God's promise to Noah and humanity for a new time here in his world with salvation. So okay, well, you're going to go with your signage. We're going to go with our signage. Both signages shouldn't be on the cap, as far as I'm concerned. Just go out there, roll out with your SF Giants cap, right? But no, we've got to have this blowback, this national blowback around the whole thing. And San Francisco and the Bay Area, filled with bleeding hearts and people that want to be fair. And I get it. We want people to have a fair shake in this world. I understand it. I got 3 planets in Libra. I totally get it. And yet we've gotten to this point where people are tired of it. They're tired of a type of artificial exceptionalism that is a reverse model of the so-called exceptionalism that was set up for, or at least theoretically set up for, people that might look like me. And people are, and it's not just, I'm telling you, it's not just people that look like me that are over it. Across the board, people have lost their patience. They're done, right? Fill in the blank fatigue. I've got Israel fatigue. I've got black fatigue. I've got gay fatigue. I've got Jewish fatigue. I've got white cracker fatigue, right? Everybody's got some fatigue in the game, right? Fatigue. And to me, this gets into this Mars-Uranus conjunction and this sextile going on with Mercury-Jupiter. It's enough. We take this shit way too fucking seriously, right? Way too seriously. And yet we have these hard boundaries that we're dealing with. Like that Moon-Saturn square is a hard boundary. It's no, thou shalt not put the rainbow on the Giants logo. And look, I actually agree with that, right? It's so funny. I was watching this video of this guy, Scott Wiener, and he's a city councilman. He's like the modern day Harvey Milk in San Francisco. And he went to this LGBTQ plus. Of course, Scott is gay, right? And not only is he gay, but he's one of these weirdly sort of NAMBLA leaning dudes, right? He just can't be adult. He's intimated that the age of consent needs to be moved back. He's one of those kinds of guys. And you would think that he would be popular at a Pride Day celebration. He was not. Why? Because Scott Wiener is pro-Israel and not pro-Palestine. And in that group, right, they were pro-Palestine. And they were heckling this guy. I mean, they were really going hard at this dude, right? And the people that were doing it were, it was like your typical Antifa up against the wall lineup. Seriously, it's what it looked like. And not just a tinge of radicalism, but very radical, very, very LGBTQ plus radical. And I looked at that and I thought to myself, is this the Giants' target audience? Are these people going to go to a fucking Giants game And the answer to that is absolutely not. Those people would not set foot in the Giants ballpark. I forget what they call it now. And it's like, that's why people are getting just tired with all of the bullshit. And we want to basically get on with our lives, which they're probably not going to theoretically allow us to do, right? And be productive and be creative and enjoy our families and, hopefully go for a walk in the woods without being bitten by a fucking genetically modified tick, right? People, I don't want to use the word fun, but people want to cast off a lot of the heaviness and the burden. And it's not just the social burden. That's part of it as well. But it's the burden of the times that we've been living in. It's like, enough already, right? Enough. So this is what I'm talking about when you have these two systems clashing, and there's this kind of anticipatory moment before Jupiter goes into Leo. And it's sort of like, I'll make an analogy. We'll keep it in the sort of the kid world. Like when I was young, living in California, the best thing that could ever happen between the age of about 8 and let's say 13 was to go to Southern California and go to Disneyland. That was the best thing that could fucking happen. The only thing that would make it better is if you stopped at Magic Mountain along the way and then hit Disneyland. And that was the daily double. Back then they had Knott's Berry Farm, which was okay. You could throw that in there for the trifecta. If you knew you were going, like if you knew that was the weekend that you were going to get in the car, and you're going to go to LA and you're going to hit those places, there was a sense of anticipation and like fun, right? Oh, wow. We're going to go to LA. It's warm there. They have tacos. We'll go to Disneyland. This Jupiter in Cancer is kind of sitting on that point, right? It's sitting on that point. So I'm going to give you a tool here for your use with astrology, right? Like, how can we use astrology? That's a really fundamental question that people ask. Well, here we go. Jupiter's at the 29th degree, anoretic. There's no energy there, but we keep looking over the wall. We keep looking over the wall and we see Jupiter and Leo on the other side. Like, hey, it's over there. It's over there. All we got to do is get over this wall. Right? Cool, man. What's it look like? Oh, it looks great. There's lots of orange trees. Cool. All right. So my enjoinder to you would be to cultivate a sense of anticipation. Well, I don't want to get let down. There's your moon, Neptune square, moon south. I don't want to get, every time I get up for something happens and they pull the rug out from under us. I can't get too excited about anything. It's all rigged. It's all fake. Nothing's real. Right? Like, okay, for a minute, put it aside. Because you're going to be living with Jupiter and Leo for 12 months. Right? Yes, you will be. And 4 of those months, it will be retrograde. The rest of those months, it will be direct. So we're just talking about the direct portion of it for now. What do you want to create? Leo is a creative sign. It's a creative sign. What do we want to create? What do you want to create? That's the question. That is the question. But when you have the answer, well, how do you know what the answer is? Let's do this. Let's say you come up with an answer. Well, geez, I'd like to create a new business or an occupation that I love. We say the world is falling apart. The financial system's going to crash. They're building all of these data centers. They're going to lock us in digital prisons. They're going to track every single transaction that we make. We'll have a social credit score. If we talk bad about certain people and groups, even though we're being fair, we'll be on a list somewhere. We'll be rounded up and we'll be thrown in those places and we never get out. Or worse yet, we may be turned into batteries for the Matrix. Just put that aside for now. Could that happen? Sure. But I'll tell you what, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next week. It's not going to happen next month. Probably won't even happen next year. You got a little bit of time here, right? You got a little bit of time here to put a dent in the plans. What do I mean by that? Well, I don't know what the percentage is, but if a percentage of us in this thing that we're living in started to live, create, and actualize on something that we're passionate about, turns us on, gives us a sense of joy, and that thing would be the most important thing to us, perhaps even a little bit selfishly, that we could turn the energy around in this world. I guarantee you we could turn the energy around. Why? Because you have to cultivate it. You have to cultivate the energy. I keep watching these videos. This guy, Jeb Brooks, and his wife, Susan, they do these travel videos. And I have to keep asking myself, why do I keep watching these travel videos? They're not experimental. They're not groundbreaking. They're two people that travel around the world, very average, right? But I realize why I like watching these videos. Because, and I know this sounds very simplistic, but sometimes the most simple things are the most true. They're always smiling. They're always smiling, and they always look like they're having a good time, right? And I've seen them take Southwest Airlines flights. I've seen them take first-class flights, and they're the same, right? They have the same kind of smiling, upbeat energy, and it's like that's why I watch those videos. And maybe every now and then, because I'm a foodie, I like to see what they prepare on these flights or these cruises, and then I get my salvation glands to start to my glands to salivate. Anyway, that's why I watch it, right? And I think there's something to that, because if you look at their output, and again, I don't know what I mean, I know a little bit about his backstory. He ran his family's business for a while. Now he's married to this woman. They fly all over the world, and they have a website, and it's called greenergrass.com. I'm not pushing them. I'm just telling you. But there's something about what they're doing in that moment that to me is very Leo-like, right? Everything is new. It's an adventure. Even, they're trying out the new Southwest Airlines schedule and planes. Like, it's like, oh, this is going to be really boring. I sat there and I watched it. And what I came away with was their energy. It was the same as it was with the first class shit, right? There's something to this. There's something to this. And I feel like right now we're at this precipice with the last few days here with Jupiter in Cancer, where it is flat, it is anoretic, right? What do you want out of your life for the next year? And I would say take the next 2 days to think about that. Not just think about it, feel into that. To feel into what you want for the next year. Right? And when it's right, it will resonate. It will resonate. What do I mean by that? You'll feel it. You go, yeah, I could do that. Or that's possible. And if it's not right, it won't resonate. And you say, okay, well, maybe I could do this, or maybe this might be something that I can connect with. And if it resonates, it works. It's a very, very simple trick. And if you understand it and you're true to yourself, you'll know where you're bullshitting yourself and where you're not. Where you're not, right, you'll feel it. So I am inviting you to ask yourself, what do I want for this next year? And how can I actively bring that into my life, joyously bring that into my life, creatively bring that into my life? I mean, let's not lose sight of the fact that this Jupiter is going to be in Leo. And if you are, I mean, I suppose if you want to, right? If you want to, you can see the glass half empty, or the part of the sky dark or part of the sky clear and sunny. I mean, it's up to you. You can live your life however you want to live it. I'm just sharing with you that in this position, with Cancer being water, right? Water is receptive. That's the important part of this, right? It's also conjunct Mercury. Mercury's gone retrograde. Okay. This is actually another part of this exercise that can be really helpful. Maybe there's something that you haven't done. Maybe there's something that you've done, but you haven't completed. I think this is really valid. This makes Mercury retrograde have a voice in this operation. So it's another component to this. Like, you're not really necessarily going backwards, but you can retrieve something from your past and say, you know what? I want to make this right, or I want to do this over, or I'd like to experience that again, but I'd like to experience it instead of not being halfway in and halfway out. I want to experience it with all my heart. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. You could take Mercury retrograde out of the equation and just hang with Jupiter here. Because again, Jupiter is water, it's receptive. So the next 48 hours roughly, right? That's an exercise that you can lean into that does involve astrology, and it does involve the ingress of Jupiter into Leo, because then you turn on the solar power, right? And that's when you power up from this moment where you are in contemplation or you're in some form of tuning the resonance. And then the power comes on, and then you move. You move into whatever that thing is. And you may not even have a complete picture, but all you need to do is have part of the picture and the emotional anchor to that. And then let your enthusiasm and your passion and your creativity and the things that connect you back to when you were a child, right, in a positive way, let that fuel you. And everybody has their version of this. When you were a kid and you lost yourself in something for hours, right? Some people made models, some people sewed dresses for their dolls, some people drew, some people painted, some people played music, right? Some people did multiple things. Some kids have wild fucking hobbies, right? But we all know what those looked like and felt like, because that's where we live with Leos. We live in the realm of the hobby. We live in the realm of the pastime. And I feel like that's so I should save a lot of this for Jupiter in Leo, because we're not even there yet. But all I'm saying with this, ultimately, to put a cap on it, right, is that I feel like this is a really timely space where, with enough contemplation, some visualization, and some permission, right, you can get into this space and dare to ask yourself, what do I want for the next year? How do I go about getting it? What turns me on? What gives me a creative jolt? What do I love? What am I passionate about? and to hell with everything else. I mean, not your most important relationships or however you're going to navigate those things, but the world, right? The world. Because over here on the other side, and I should wait. But the first thing Jupiter is going to do is going to oppose Pluto. We'll talk about that when we get to Jupiter and Leo. Let me get through some of this full moon stuff here, and then we'll revisit the Jupiter and Leo thing. Okay, so we have the full moon in Capricorn, which I've been talking about and addressing, right? It is the moon that says no. Flat out, simple, no. Now, it also squares Neptune, right? And it will also start to square Saturn. Now, we can't negate whatever reality, whatever this cycle, this culmination cycle, and it is a culmination cycle because that's where the full moon, manifests itself, right? So whatever you were doing at the beginning of the full moon or the full moon phase or new moon phase, it's going to manifest here during the full moon. And I know some of you are moon watchers and you live by the cycles. So just keep that in mind, right? So we go back to that new moon in Cancer, and like what was going on then in your life. What were you dealing with, working on? What were you feeling? Well, here we go. This is some of the outcome, not all the outcome, but some of the outcome. Now, if you weren't really aware and conscious and sort of seeding that new moon, right? How does this affect us in general? It feels to me, this is just my read on this energy. Like in general, it kind of goes back into the beginning of the show when I said people were tired and people were fatigued and they don't give a fuck, right? Like I really don't care about a football player who signed a $100 million contract and every day melts down on Instagram and does a clown show. I don't really care about that. Right? I'm referring to Brandon Ayuk, right? It's like, dude, you picked the wrong moment. You picked the wrong moment to melt down and try to turn this into some kind of weird civil rights issue. Nobody cares. And the people who do care, go start a GoFundMe for them. Right. And this is the moon in Capricorn, unfortunately. And that is a pervasive kind of vibe. There's a good chance you will feel this, right? If you haven't already felt it, you may feel it from other people as well. Unfortunately, Capricorn also happens to be bureaucratic. And it's not, to me, it's like, oh, okay, moon in Capricorn. Yeah. Let's talk about cutting Social Security benefits, right? That would be a total moon in Capricorn moment, squaring Neptune. Well, would that happen? Not likely. They got to get their midterms won. They can't spook the boomers or people that are on Social Security, or could be. I'm one of them, although I haven't taken it, right? They can't do that. But I'll tell you, that's what we get with the moon in Capricorn. It's like Ben Shapiro. People should retire at the age of 70 or 75. That's a better time. That's moon in Capricorn. That's the officious nature of the state and doesn't really care about a whole lot else. And that'd be fine if it was efficient and officious, but it's not. Right? So when we have the Neptune square, what happens? Well, we come into the hypocrisy of that. The Neptune square shows us that even though there are these rigid standards that want to be applied, and we're talking socially, and this is all tomorrow and going into the next day, the Neptune square with the moon says, well, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. Why are we going down this path? No, this makes no sense whatsoever, right? So the Neptune square to the moon is the reality check. And the reality check is, well, you can live without it. You can live with us. It's sort of like when they started the war. Short-term pain, long-term gain, right? I think that's part of the math that's coming up. How are we doing with the short-term pain and the long-term gain? Are we good with the short-term pain, or are we having a short-term pain check coming up here soon? Now, as the moon continues its ingress, it will start to square Saturn, and that is downright depressive. If you were born with the moon Saturn square in your chart, you will understand what that means, because you have felt it, and maybe you haven't felt it, and that's the problem, because sometimes with the moon Saturn square, feelings can be quite dulled because they represent a form of depression, low-grade depression, which at times I've had to deal with in my life, really heavily in my early 20s. That's another story. But that's part of this lunar cycle that we're in. And it's in the immediate, it is a tricky lunar cycle, I have to say. Because with the moon Neptune square, it's sort of like it's not that your dreams are dashed, but it's like you come home and you're looking forward to a slice of apple pie, and it's not there. Right? What happened to my apple pie? You know, I thought I was gonna have some apple. No, sorry, you don't get any pie. No pie for you. Oh, well, why not? Well, because the Indian family that moved down the street just got your apple pie. I'm kidding, but I'm kind of true here. I'm being kind of true. This is the energy behind this full moon. This is like, okay, these people are getting low interest loans. They're getting healthcare. They're getting what? Right? That's the moon in Capricorn. That's the government. Oh, we'll take care. Well, yeah, we'll take care of everybody. Right? And then you find out, like, that's what they're getting, and we're not getting that? What the fuck? Right? That is the moon Neptune square, kind of in a nutshell. And I would not be surprised if we see some of this over the next 48 hours. Like they pull back the curtain and like, what? How come we don't get that shit, right? And then we get into the moon Saturn square, and that can be just downright depressing. Well, I thought that the system was supposed to work for us. I mean, we pay all these taxes, and you know, we're buying Mohammed's piece of pie. I mean, I'm being a little facetious here, but this is the energy that I'm talking about. That's at a social level, because the moon in Capricorn is very bureaucratic. It's the worst part of the bureaucracy. You have Big Brother. The moon in Capricorn is Big Mother, but she's not very maternal. Now, the good news is, at least for a minute, just a minute, it does trine Chiron, which has gone into Taurus, which means maybe you need to take care of your own pie and go bake your own pie. Be responsible for your own worldly experience. Hello, Chiron and Taurus. Yes, they can be part of it. But then on the other side, we've got the sun in Cancer. And the sun in Cancer is really the setup for all of it. Right? The sun in Cancer is, bring us your tired and huddled masses. The Statue of Liberty, Columbia, who might be fronting as a M to F, possibly, right? We have that, right? That's who we are. Like, we are here. I'm just talking about this country for a second. Europe, you got your own version of this. All the countries of the West have their own version of this, unfortunately. Right. So I'm just going to use the US version of it because it's kind of what we're known for here. But it's very Cancerian, right? Yes, we'll be the home. We'll be the home for the dispossessed. We'll be the home for those people that were traumatized in some other foreign land, and some reckless and tyrannical dictator killed parts of their family, and they had to find asylum here. The United States is filled with those chapters. Filled with those chapters. So that's what we've been known for. And we've done a pretty good job. Right? As a country, by and large, we've done a pretty good job. You get here, you get your foot in the door, and next thing you know, you're Barack fucking Obama and you're president of the United States. I'm being a little facetious. But he theoretically is supposed to represent that, even with a Kenyan father, supposedly, right? He found some opportunity here, supposedly. That's what this place is about. It's very Cancerian. And yet, when the moon opposes the sun in Capricorn, it is putting strain on the system. And we're beginning to wonder how, like, we've been great with all the people from the World Cup that have been here. I showed you guys those videos. They're like, total emotional cleansers. They're emotional palate cleansers. They're great. And we will continue to be great hosts and hostesses because that's who we are. That's who we are. However, when we get into this period, right, and we always get into this period of time, once a year, we have a full moon in Capricorn and the sun in Cancer, but we don't always have that full moon squaring Neptune, and we don't always have it squaring Saturn. And in fact, this is the first full moon square to Neptune and Saturn since Neptune and Saturn went into Aries. Those first transits tend to be somewhat significant. It's sort of like cutting the ribbon, bashing the bottle of champagne on the bow of a ship, and any other sort of commemorative moment, right? But this isn't necessarily, I would say, celebratory commemorative. This is like, oh, wait a minute. Haven't we had enough of this? We're gonna rubber stamp more, right? So I think this full moon is interesting because, again, underneath it, we have this other current going on, which is we've had enough of this shit, right? We want to, and this is the frustrating part, right? This is part of the frustrating part. It's like, well, I'm just one little person. I can't change anything. Right. So I'm just going to go about, live my life and do the best I can. Well, you can change something. And I just gave you the instruction manual early on. Jupiter in Leo is the vehicle for you as an individual to invest in love, passion, creativity, finding something from when you were younger, reinvesting in it, whatever it is. It could be a hobby, it could be a pastime, it could be a feeling. It could be a profound feeling, like when, like maybe you had a realization when you were young that it was something that perhaps got dimmed a bit over time. Well, try and light it again. And I think this is really important. I'll come back to it when we talk more about Jupiter and Leo. Let's get into this Mars-Uranus conjunction. Okay. So, one of the things that was interesting, and God damn it, I really should have picked up on this because we have Mars in Taurus. And when Uranus was in Taurus, like there was some seismic action with it was like, I'm always looking at 27, 28, those final degrees of the sign where it gets really kind of agitated and chaotic. And I think we did have some seismic action. I think there was a volcano that went off that was pretty significant, if I'm not mistaken. And it was during those, that last degree, 28, 29 of Mars in Taurus. But I didn't really do the astrological math with Mars in Taurus and Uranus in Gemini, which I should have. And had I done it and paid attention to it, I would have definitely looked at the seismic activity, right? I think I was talking about something else. Like I was more invested in sort of the conjunction with Algol with Mars and getting over not being able to express yourself and take action. Like that's where I was going with that Mars action. Had I looked at it the other perspective, probably would have tapped into it. But here we are, right? Mars, Gemini conjunction. Gemini is young. It is youthful energy. Youthful energy. And we're going to have very early on this Jupiter ingress into Leo. So put a pin on that. I'm going to talk about that energy when we get into Jupiter and Leo and what it means for young people and our relationship with young people, especially during the course of the summer. We'll come back to that in a second, right? But this is very energetic. Very, very energetic. And while we have the doldrums, again, this goes back into this high pressure front, low pressure front colliding together. And while we have the doldrums here, we do not have the doldrums here. And sextiles, if you buy my book and dive in, what you'll find out with sextiles is that they must be activated. Trines sort of come out of their own volition, whether they're in the natal chart or whether they're in a transit chart. Sextiles are activating, right? So this is an activating energy. You have to act on it. So Mars and Gemini, endless curiosity, restless. For all you people that are traveling, Mars, Gemini, Uranus conjunctions, even though at least for now, it's a reasonable conjunction for now. When the moon goes into Pisces, we'll have another discussion about that. And that's not that far off, right? We're basically, close to that lunar cycle. I think it'll be 4th of July. I got a 4th of July. Where are we? Chart up here. And we've got moon in Pisces on 4th of July. That's right. We'll revisit that for the 4th of July, and we'll talk about that. You need to pay attention to that. That is absolutely 100% sure, right? So, but again, right? What does this manifest itself in? A desire to cast off the chains. Like we're tired of this shit. Mars Uranus conjunctions are wired, especially in Gemini. They want to try something new. You got a trine with Pluto here going on as well, right? And Pluto is like digging deep. It's also retrograde as well, right? We got a little Pluto. So we have Pluto, we have Juno retrograde, and we have Mars, which is like, let's kickstart this thing. Let's kickstart this motherfucker. That's the energy, right? But the key here is you need to be able to get into this Jupiter in Cancer, right? And think about, what do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? Where do I want to go? Like, how do I bring more passion, more of a sense of being alive into my life, right? That's really what we're talking about. Because if you don't do that, what will happen? Well, you'll be all revved up with no place to go. That's the key here. Once these energies engage, you don't even have to, again, I'll bring it back. You don't have to have the full picture. You just need part of it. And then you engage through the sextile, and that activity or that activity level leads you to the next, 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 to the next. That's how it works. Like when you were a kid, that's what you did as a child. Like you tried this out and led to the next thing and the next thing. And as long as you didn't get too frustrated, you'd learn something. You'd figure something out. You'd have a new skill. And that's the other thing about Gemini, right? Gemini, and for all you people, let me just say this. This is important. For all of you people that have acquired lots of little skills, and I'm not demeaning your little skills, by the way, but you know who you are, right? You're you're like the dabblers of the cosmos. Usually you have third house aspects, or you have some interesting Gemini aspects in the first house, where you can do a lot of different things, right? You've got all these certifications, but how do you put them all together, or how do you put some of them together so that they become synthesized in one thing? That is the challenge for you people who have that, with this Mars-Uranus conjunction and Jupiter going into Leo. It's like, okay, I've got all this knowledge. I've got all these tools. How do I put them together? Well, that's what you're supposed to do during this cycle, right? It's a really powerful cycle for synthesis, because that's what Gemini does. Gemini synthesizes things together. It fuses ideas. It fuses oppositions, right? That's the nature of Gemini. So when we have this Mars-Uranus conjunction, right, that's the action. And then with Jupiter, it's like, okay, I'm going to take the leap. I'm going to commit to doing this. And this is the time, right? Because if you're not going to do it, then when are you going to do it? Look, you'll have plenty of time to fix, tweak, change, alter, whatever kind of evolutionary leap you take right here to here. Why? Because number one, Jupiter will go retrograde in December. And then beyond that, it goes into Virgo. So you can always make changes to or edit the things that you said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going to put my energy. This is where I'm going to commit, right? So it's not like you're going to be stuck there forever. Like, you can and probably will have to do some editing along the way. But, you know, if we're looking at, we're going to use astrology as like a window, right? Like, if we're looking at a window, an opportunity for this to take place, it's now, right? This is happening. July 1st, Jupiter goes into Leo. And it's like, if not now, when? You said, well, Robert, what about Mercury retrograde? Shall I wait till Mercury retrograde is over to start something? Maybe. It depends. If you are doing something that you've previously done, but you've set aside or need to revisit it, Mercury retrograde is a perfect time to go there and say, you know what? I got to do this. I got to take care of this business. And maybe it's the business that you have to take care of first that allows you to dive in and make this connection with this energy possible. Clearing the deck, so to speak. Right. Now, we will go through the Mercury retrograde cycle, and but I don't think at a feeling level, right, and more than a feeling level, at an intentional level, Mercury retrograde should not stop you. Would I go out and sign a lease on a new place to start a new business during the Mercury retrograde? I don't know. It depends. It depends. Let's say you're taking over somebody else's lease. Possible. There's a possibility with that, because that would fit under the the rubric of Mercury retrograde. But would I start off and sign a new lease for something? Mercury? Probably not. Probably not. Would I get everything together for that moment to happen when it goes direct? Absolutely. Whatever that is. So again, this is a very, very interesting time, because we have planets, Mars just moving into Gemini, Jupiter just about ready to move into Leo, right? We've got Chiron, which has just moved into Taurus. So the heavens they're shifting above us. Okay. What else do we have? We have Venus in Leo, which is fantastic. I love Venus in Leo. And it's trining Saturn. Now, we don't have a lot of Earth in the sky, and that's why this moon in Capricorn will stick out like a sore fucking thumb. But we do have Venus trining Saturn. And even though it's not Earth, it is a bit more grounded. So Venus and Leo, we love Venus and Leo. It's our relationship to love. It's our relationship to feeling alive. It's our relationship to art. It's our relationship to the spark of creativity, right? It's all those things. It's fun. Hang out with people. It's more fun to hang out with fun people with Venus and Leo than hanging out with what's the word I'm looking for? Oh God, I'm spacing out. Sticks in the mud. We'll just throw that out there, right? But at the same time, right, relationships that start and connect under this Venus-Saturn trine, and it's been there for a while, right? So it's been there for about 5-6 days when it started to go into trine with Saturn. When that Venus-Saturn trine happens, those relationships can be very grounded and very solid. And we're still in the trine. So it's a quality of both fun and enjoyment and pleasure and also being adult about it, because that's what Saturn brings to the table, right? It's the anchor, it's the tether. I think it's a wonderful transit, actually, to plug into. Let's talk about, why don't we do this? Why don't we shift into 4th of July? Because I think that's a good place to go. And we could talk about this Mars-Uranus thing. All right. So this is July 4th. I got 11 a.m. here. If I put 12, I probably got it closer to the midheaven. But so what we're looking at is Mars-Uranus. This is that 4th of July energy that I was talking about. So we have a Mars-Uranus conjunction, and here's that moon in Pisces that I was also talking about. So we're taking the pin out of it. Boy. Okay, let me say this. I don't know if you guys remember this or not. If you're like an old head, you would remember this. And it's just now tweaking my synapses a little bit. Whenever we would have a 3-day weekend, whether it was like Memorial Day or Veterans Day or 4th of July, usually those 3 weekends. On that Monday, because it was usually go Friday, Saturday, something like that, right? On that Monday, what would happen they would have a fatality rate. They would always talk about the fatalities, and they would say how many crashes were reported nationwide. And then they would talk about so it would be injuries and fatalities. So like over the 4th of July weekend, there were 573 traffic accidents reported that resulted in 215 people being injured and 17 fatalities. Like you would hear that all the time. We would. Not that I miss it, but it's not something that I've heard in a while. Well, there's a reason I'm talking about this, because this Mars-Uranus conjunction squaring the moon in Pisces has that fatality energy, like being on the road with intoxicated people. By the way, did you know that people's consumption of alcohol is dropping in this country? Gen Z apparently is not that into drinking. Now, they may be in some other substances, but they're not that into drinking. And then we have a fairly large Muslim population that is starting to populate they don't drink. Right? So if they're using those numbers as part of the baseline for how many people are here and how many people purchase alcohol and sales, they're going to add up to the non-purchasing segment of the population. So alcohol sales are they're down, and they're starting to continue to trend down, which is kind of interesting. Probably not a bad thing. That said, right, this is definitely a boozy weekend, 4th of July weekend. And so number one, you got to watch out for being on the road during the 4th of July. Mars in Gemini is restless energy. You combine it with Uranus, and then it's restless and reckless, and squaring the moon in Pisces, which can result in overindulgence with alcohol and substances. If you're driving on the 4th of July, be very careful. Very careful. Even if you're not driving, if you're walking around, watch out for people on bicycles that are, inebriated, intoxicated. Just keep an eye out for it. This is a very woozy energy, I'm telling you, just in general. Right. So that's part of this square, the square to the moon with Pisces. Now, could this result in, this is what some astrologers have been throwing out there, could this result in a false flag? Everybody's been thinking this is going to be the day. This is going to be where, we're going to have a 9/11 times 11. Does this line up astrologically? Because remember, right, when the Twin Towers happened, the moon was in Gemini and Saturn was in Gemini. So we're not quite in moon-Saturn territory, but we are in Mars-Uranus territory. And if I'm not mistaken, Ceres is at the same degree that Saturn was, or close, during when the Twin Towers collapsed. So could we be dealing with something explosive? And again, if we're looking at the moon, which is the ruler of Cancer, right, the moon being the homeland, and Mars, Uranus squaring off against that moon, could it result in something like that? Something quite deceptive, destructive? Maybe. Could. But we're calling it out, right? We're calling it out right now. And we called it out 2 weeks ago. And if it does happen, well, we've talked about it. We've opened it up. We've aired it out. Could they blow up pipelines? Could they blow up oil rigs? That would all be very moon in Pisces, right? Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we could make a case for all of that, right? But will it happen? I don't think it will. And the reason why I don't think it will, again, I talked about this last week, and it's because of Uranus, and it's because of Pluto, primarily in Aquarius. And the things that are supposed to happen generally don't. The things that don't happen generally do. And the things that are supposed to go according to plan usually don't. And those things that are not even on the table all of a sudden pop up and then they become an option. Right? This is what we're talking about. Now, in the best case scenario, it would be caught in the act. Right? Like there are very few circumstances, very few incidents where they've caught somebody in the act of skullduggery, right? Meaning that they were going to be a perpetrator of some kind of psychological operation or false flag. The one event that comes to mind was the Olympics in Atlanta in 1996, when Richard Jewell came upon a very unusual looking backpack at the Olympic Village at the Olympics in Atlanta. And I've told this story before. I was not very far from the Olympic Village. And I left that area about 45 minutes before that went off. Now, he scuttled it, right? So it went off in an area that was cordoned off so that it would blow up safely. Like they have one of those bomb detonator things. However, I believe at least one person died from a heart attack because they told the crowd, and there was a lot of kind of mayhem in the crowd at that time, and people were shocked, and there was a lot of frenzied energy, and one guy had a heart attack. But it could have been a lot worse, right? It was one of those explosives that was also a nail bomb. So those nails were scheduled to become projectiles going into everybody within probably about a 100-foot radius, right? So Richard Jewell scuttles it. And it's one of those rare times where it feels like, the cheese stinks in Denmark. Because they tried to pin this on Richard Jewell. And it takes them years to pin it on this other guy, Eric. I forget his last name. It'll come to me. But he was a guy that was often associated with these Planned Parenthood bombings. It'll come to me. And so they're like, oh, yeah, this guy did it. And it was years after. But Eric Rudolph is his name. Eric Rudolph. Sounds like a good Nazi, doesn't it? Eric Rudolph. Anyway. But they did it so long after the fact. It's like, oh, we got our patsy. So Richard Jewell fucked up the plan. He fucked up their plan. And what was going on at that time is that the Clintons were going to pass this anti-terror legislation. And they were going to use that event now, I think they passed it anyway. Like, did they really need to? And I'm making a big leap here, okay? And the leap is that it resembled maybe state-sponsored or company-sponsored terrorism. I think there's a pretty good case to be made for that. And they passed the anti-terror bill anyway. So this is what I'm talking about, right? The ability to actually scuttle something before it happens. Will that happen? Maybe. Could we have a doom event on the 4th of July? Maybe. But the more we talk about it, the more we bring it up, the more that we air it out, the more that we bring light to it, the answer to that is no. Is no. And if it does happen, well, fuck, we talked about it, right? And how predictable is that? And wouldn't it be really predictable for them to just do something on the 4th of July anyway? So would it be the 3rd of July, 5th of July? Would they try to keep us off balance? Like, at this point, go back to our friend over here, right? And over here, it's like, we're just tired. We're tired of it, right? And we need to go back and start living our lives. So I would say that by and large, that this energy is connected to what I would call a bit of overindulgence. Now, I will also say that since America will be beating its 200, let's say the heartbeat of America beats once every year, right? This will be its 250th beat, theoretically, right? Long beat. That there are going to be people who are going to get really into it, right? Really, really into it. You know, gung-ho America. Get ready for that. Like, get ready for gung-ho America. Like, Americans are like, we're tired. We're tired of being shat on. And it's like, oh, really? Like, is it your country going around the world and being modern day colonizers still? It's like, well, that's not really us, okay? As a whole, we're just tired of being shat on, right? And there are a lot of Americans who are like, fuck it, I'm unapologetically American. We got all these people from Europe. They love it here. They're reminding us why we like it here or why this place is so special. And that's where we get into the sun-moon trine. And the moon, of course, is the ruler of Cancer, which the sun is in. And then we have the sun conjuncting Sirius, which, of course, is vitally important as its binary twin. And so, yeah, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to be really, really pumped about being American. Really pumped about being American. I guarantee you. And is that going to cause problems for other people? Possibly. Right? We've got a Sun-Saturn square that day. If you're really into being an American, then you're pro-MAGA and you're pro-Trump and all the things that go along with it. It's like, well, no, man, I just really love America. Those people have their own thing. They're interpreting it their own way. They're like the Mormonism of patriots. They think they're Christians, but they're doing their own thing. So yeah, there's going to be some of that, right? And there's going to be, I'm just looking at the Sun-Saturn square, and like there's going to be shaming going on during this time. Like, how dare you, Americans? How dare America? Right? There's that. That's happening. You can see it with the Sun-Saturn square, Sun-Neptune square, mostly Sun-Saturn. Right? So people are flying their flags and waving their colors, and they're getting into it. But it's not without a sense of tension either from perhaps other groups. What, some states aren't going to celebrate the 4th of July? Have I heard that? Well, how's that going to go over? I don't think that's a good precedent. It's like you're still a part of the fucking country until further notice. But I could see that. I could see that being a big deal. So I feel like that this 4th of July is going to bring out some extreme energy. You're going to get it with a Mars-Uranus conjunction. You got that Jupiter sextile. Here we go. There's our friend Jupiter and Leo coming in and being a part of that sextile. It's like people are fucking ready to, I'm telling you, man, they're ready to party on this 4th of July. And the party theme is America, USA, right? But not everybody's going to be down with the party. And some of that's going to start and happen before it actually happens. So it's going to be, the energy's kind of weird, right? Like the energy is going to be kind of weird. This is kind of classically American. And this is at 11 a.m. So the moon is going to continue to ingress in Pisces, right? And it's going to go deeper into that trine with the sun. So we're going to get kind of more embroiled in that Cancerian energy, right? And in Pisces, we kind of lose ourselves. And the boundaries begin to dissolve. So this is a very interesting day, this 4th of July. I would say in some ways, not just due to the fact that it's historical for the 250th year, but it has kind of a historical vibe. Can people get along on 4th of July? Could be a bit debatable. We have Venus and Leo at 24 degrees. And what's it doing? It's squaring Mars and squaring Uranus. Now, we're going to see more of that as it gets closer to Virgo, which would be maybe the aftermath or the blowback or whatever happens after the 4th of July, right? But we know that with Venus-Mars squares, people are passionate. They're passionate about their feelings. I mean, if you are in a partnership with somebody and their Venus squares your Mars, I guarantee you're not always going to get along, right? You're going to fight a lot, but you'll also have great makeup sex. You may have a lot of passion in the relationship. The best part of the relationship would be if you challenged each other, right? In a good way. If you challenge each other, you could bring out the best in each other. Quite possibly. You'd have to look at it that way. It would then it would depend on, who's Venus to who's Mars, right? And Venus Mars squares can be a little explosive, but it's not for, lacking passion. That's for damn sure, right? So people are going to be very passionate about what they're expressing on the 4th of July. Let's put it that way. How do relationships fare on the 4th of July? Well, I would say you may not want to get too inebriated and too reckless because you might indulge in something that later on you may regret. Although who knows, maybe that's what you might need to break through the ennui and the moribund gravity of your relationship. You might have to conjure something up here, right? And if you're in that space, let me tell you, this energy will be more than willing to comply to your breakout strategy or lack thereof. So we also have this Jupiter-Pluto opposition. Let's talk about that because let's put a pin on that. We'll put a pin on that, and we'll bring that to the table when we go to do the Jupiter in Leo section here. But it's wild, right? Like 4th of July, Jupiter just goes into Leo, and it's Party City, USA. But it's also a global Jupiter in Leo as well. So why don't we do that? I mean, I think we've sort of squeezed the meaning out of the 4th of July. Could something big happen? Yes, something could happen. Could it be explosive? Yes, it could be explosive. But on the other hand, could it just be a fucking nothing burger? Because number one, we're talking about it. And number two, is there a greater chance for the thing that's supposed to happen to go sideways and be exposed? I'm going to check that box. Is there going to be resistance to this idea of celebrating the 250th birthday? Are all the anti-MAGA people going to come out? All the people that have a distaste in America and Trump, are they going to come out and have issues with this day? The answer to that is yes. The Sun-Saturn square almost guarantees it, right? Are you going to be unable to have fun and enjoy yourself? No, absolutely not. You'll be able to enjoy yourself, have fun. Like you can get into it, right? Can you overdo it? Absolutely. Absolutely, you can overdo it. And you want to pay attention to your environment with people who have overdone it. 100%. Yes. Okay. And how do relationships fare under this influence? They're passionate. They can be argumentative. You don't want to overindulge to the point where, again, you all of a sudden, I mean, maybe that's on your dance card, right? And all of a sudden you don't have a relationship, right? Because that's what happens with the Venus-Uranus square. Next thing you know, you're spinning off into another direction. Like those are all part of the elements with 4th of July. It's going to be a very, very interesting day. No doubt. I think the biggest part of it are the days leading up to it, because that's where we're going to start to get into that Sun-Saturn square. And you're going to start to feel this resistance, at least here in this country. For you people that aren't in the United States, that Sun-Saturn square has a different kind of manifestation. But you still feel it. It's heavy, right? It's the sort of the quote unquote, the elite, the ruling class, the donor class, this is what we like to call them, starting to get heavy. And it's not just them getting heavy, but it's the people that in many ways represent the special interest groups that those donor classes have weaponized. And let's face it, they've weaponized them against the rest of the world. And I'm not saying that there can't be certain tracks and certain evolutionary paths for people that are not from a particular culture or not from a particular place. Of course there are and can be. However, that said, if we're being completely and utterly honest, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, I saw this video the other day. Played it on my show, actually. Kind of wish I hadn't played it. But I'll give you the background. It was in Spain. It was a beach in Spain. And there was an import, not from Spain. And he was at the edge of the beach, not by the water, but where you sort of hit the sand. And he's looking out over all the people on the beach, many of whom are female and scantily clad at that. And it's just too much for him. And he winds up masturbating in public in front of all these people, right? Women and children. You know, something that generally here in the North and the West that we generally don't do, right? We have little places where you can, you know, put $1 into a machine and pull back a curtain and go do it. However, that was not available to this traveler on the beach. And I saw him like, oh my God, I wish I hadn't played that. Well, then I saw the follow-up video. And these people started beating the hell out of the dude. All right, it was wild. I was like, whoa, I didn't see that part. And it was so wild, right? And this guy was like fighting for his life, right? He's got like 3 Spaniards that are like going. And this one guy takes a fucking plastic chair and hits him over the head with it, smashes the fucking plastic chair. And this guy's in such a rage, it doesn't stop him, right? It's wild. Wow, look at that. And then, of course, there's the bleeding heart liberal woman who jumps in and tries to stop it all. And then, you know, she walks away with the guy. Are you okay? Are you okay? Anyway, that's kind of what I'm talking about, right? That's your Sun-Saturn square. If you're not living here in this country, that's kind of what I'm referring to. It's like, who did this? How did these people get here? And what do we do now? Right? Those are questions that have been asked. And I'm sure there's not a lot of answers unless you go watch that video and it's, you know, break the pool furniture over the guy's head, which didn't do a lot, which is a little scary, actually. But that's what I'm talking about, July 4th, with this Sun-Saturn energy, Sun-Saturn square, and especially in Aries. You know, for me, Saturn in Aries is representative of the, you know, the bureaucracy, right? But it's the bully side of the bureaucracy. It's like, you know, you're going to follow orders, you're going to listen to what I say, and it doesn't fucking matter, right? It's like the tyrant. It's like the Caesar. You know, they passed this War Powers Act thing. I think it went through Congress and Senate, and they keep reminding Trump, hey, you're running an illegal war over here because we passed this. He doesn't care. He's not listening. That's Saturn in Aries. When the ruling class or the elite or the principal or the president, they don't listen. They don't listen. Saturn Aries, no. And it's very unapologetic. The retrograde, which comes in July, later in July, that's going to be something that'll be interesting to watch, but we're not going to talk about that for now. So that's your 4th of July forecast here. Looks like a lot of fun. It looks like there's some party poopers with this Sun-Saturn square that aren't really that into allowing other people to have fun and celebrate the 250th heartbeat of the country. What are you going to do? Well, you go out there and enjoy yourself, enjoy life, but make sure that you pay attention, especially when you're on the road. Just pay attention in general, right? Because this Mars-Uranus conjunction is wild energy, really, really wild. And it sets up a much bigger kind. This is the first, remember, we're talking about first here, right? This is the first Mars-Uranus conjunction in Gemini, under Uranus and Gemini, the first one. So usually those first cycles are cray, right? Because they're right at the beginning of the sign. And, I think it's interesting. The energy is interesting. There's a lot of dimensions here with Mars-Uranus. It's also a little devilish. And there's a lot of trickster energy with this Mars-Uranus conjunction. I would say if you want to get on top of it, just be willing to don't get too attached to your ego with a Mars-Uranus conjunction. That's my best advice. Play, have fun, be experimental, right? Just don't get too attached to your ego. Don't take yourself seriously. Because that Mars-Uranus energy will take you down, right? And, it doesn't last a long time, because, Mars moves fairly quickly. So it's at 0 now. It'll be at 4 on the 4th of July. And we can, basically take that out to about 8 or 9 degrees, which would be, roughly about a week afterwards, still in conjunction with Uranus. Just don't take yourself so seriously. Play, have fun. With this conjunction, it's better to be a bit of the fool than it is to take yourself seriously. Right? If you have kids or grandkids, my God, this is great energy. Really great energy. So file that away as well. Get your money's worth with your kids and your grandkids. Well, you have to step in and play the parent. Of course you will. Sun-Saturn square. But that's what being a parent's about. Grandkid energy. I'm telling you, man, this is great grandkid energy. And it reminds us of what it's like to be young again, right, on some level. So it's whether it's the young people or the activities that they're involved with, right? And we're just going to hold that space that anything that is connected to doom, false flags, psychological operations, right? We cast thee out by that name. And that the reverse happens. And if anything that happens, like we'll put in a magical reverse spell. That's what we'll do. That any false flag, psychological operation, any hardcore socially engineered tactic gets inverted, right? And it boomerangs back on the people that set it in motion and will perpetuate it. There you go. And at the very least, it allows us to follow their tracks back to where it all started, right? Okay, that's your 4th of July template. I think we've covered it. I think we've got a pretty decent template to experience this energy by, both from the macro all the way down to the micro and the individual. All right, let's talk some Jupiter and Leo. Let's see if we can get on out of here in about a half an hour, since you've been so patiently waiting. All right, so what about Jupiter and Leo? I have a graphic for you. Life goes better with graphics. Look at that. Doesn't that look great? I just want to be there. I'd like to be there. Those people are having good, wholesome fun. Good, wholesome family fun. And I bet you there's no mega ticks there either. All right, Jupiter enters Leo 7/1/26. So that's July 1st. It retrogrades on the 13th of December. There should be a 26 in there. And it retrogrades at 27 degrees. So it gets right to the end. What's interesting about that is it sits right on Trump's ascendant and his Mars, and he goes backwards into his 12th house. If he's not done by then, he'll be done by then. That Jupiter retrograde into his 12th house is not a great transit, because it's like a high point, and then it moves away from like Mars, which is his most vital planet in his chart on the ascendant. It goes direct on tax day of next year, and that's at 15 degrees. So Jupiter goes retrograde for 4 months. So it's in a sign for 12 months, and it goes retrograde for 4 months. So it moves into Virgo finally on 7/27. So roughly 3 weeks after or beyond this date, the 7/1/26 date. Okay, so those are your Jupiter parameters. That's when it goes into Leo. That's your retrograde on the 26th. Put a 2 in there. And then it goes direct on tax day of next year, right? And then we've got basically 3 more months of Jupiter and Leo, and then we've got a year of Jupiter and Virgo. Okay. All right. What else do we want to know about this cycle? Okay. So the last time Jupiter was in Leo, let me bring this up here. Okay. So this was the last Jupiter and Leo cycle, and it was 7/17/14 to 8/12/15. So again, coming in right around July, right? So Jupiter seems to drift in around July, and it seems to it ingresses right around July, and then it egresses sometime in late July, or in this case, middle August. This is like a late checkout, right? So what was the world like in 2014? What were some of the events? Well, we had a World Cup in 2014, just like we have now. But let's go to July of 2014, because that's when we can start to track this thing. So in July of 2014, in the World Cup semifinals, Brazil was beaten 7-1 by Germany after trailing 0-5 in 29 minutes. So we're not quite there yet. It starts off with a bang. Malaysia Airlines, Flight 17, a Boeing 777, crashes in eastern Ukraine after being shot down by a missile. All 298 people were killed on board. That's where Jupiter in Leo takes off on that July. So listen to that. July 17th, Flight 17. Pretty weird, right? Boeing 777. 3 sevens. Wow. Now, I have a theory about that plane. So my theory about that plane, because I followed that closely, my theory, here, we'll just go through this. So we're right there. See that? Right there. My theory about that plane is that was flight, I believe it was 305. I believe that was flight 305. That was flight 305, and they had changed like the numbers of the flight. Remember at flight 305 that just disappeared? I believe this was that flight. And all the people were on board. This is just my take, were the corpses of the people who were on board flight 305. Why do I know this, or why do I think this? Because a very early report that took place during that time was there was a hunter, and he saw this plane go down. And he went there, and he went to go look at the wreckage. And what he found, and this is the important part, what he found was that there were people who were in that plane, or at least the wreckage of the plane, who looked like they had been dead for quite a long time. Now, you have to ask yourself, well, why did they go about doing this? I don't really have the answer to that question, except maybe that this flight was headed somewhere and it was completely remote controlled, which they can do. And it was on some kind of a mission with these quote unquote bodies, right? And it got shot down. Now, I don't know who shot it down. Was it the Ukrainians? Was it the Russians? Maybe it was Ukrainians, right? But this is where it starts. And that's my theory, that this was actually flight 305. And that those people on board that flight were on board flight 305. And that's how they got rid of it. Anyway, a theory. Right out of the gate, we've got a typhoon, big typhoon, hits China. It's a Cat 5 typhoon, right? Okay. Monty Python comes to an era. Monty Python Live closes. Everybody sheds a tear. We have another flight, an Air Algiers flight, 5017, McDonnell Douglas MD-83, crashes in Mali, killing 116 people. So already we're starting to see some airline stuff taking place during the last Jupiter and Leo cycle. We've got plenty of bloody massacres. We have the Sinjar massacre, beginning of ISIS attacks. Well, it's the birth of ISIS. Remember ISIS? Jupiter and Leo, low. 4,000 Yazidis in Iraq's Sinjar district killed. August 7th, Khmer Rouge leaders Nguyen Che and Q Sampham are found guilty of crimes against humanity. They're sentenced to life imprisonment by the Khmer Rouge Tribunal. So we have sort of the resolution of one radical group and their crimes against humanity and the beginning of another. An American-led intervention in Iraq. The United States military begins an air campaign in northern Iraq to stem the flux of ISIL. Yeah, we had the Iraq war going on. Oh, look, the World Health Organization declares an Ebola outbreak. Oh. And what have we been dealing with? Ebola. August 9th, we have the shooting of Michael Brown. Ferguson, Missouri. This is the beginning of, guess what? Yes, the slow march towards George Floyd and 2020. Michael Brown is the second individual. Michael Brown is the one that really put people on full tilt. It wasn't Trayvon Martin. It was Michael Brown. And that happens on August 9th. Okay, so we have a lot of ISIS, a lot of ISIL. We have a lot of proxy war going on, American-led intervention in Syria. That's all happening, right? Just take note of that. We've got some volcanic activity happening in Japan, right? Which I think we'll probably see more of as well, with Jupiter squaring Chiron, very explosive. And that's happening fairly soon, fairly early on here, right? What else do we have? That guy did the longest free fall jump out of a massive helium-filled balloon over Roswell. Remember that? It was like that guy was like he was like a falling angel, right? A fallen angel. And then Felix Baumgartner, I think, went a little bit higher. We had Bangladesh faces a nationwide blackout. Oh, that's something else I wanted to bring up with this Mars-Uranus conjunction. Energy. And quite possibly blackout energy. I'm just putting that out there. Okay. So when you look at, so we've got Michael Brown, right? We got Michael Brown. Where is he? Mr. Ferguson, right there. So when we saw Michael Brown, he was portrayed, again, as kind of a young person, right? We didn't see like the full-blown Michael Brown, who was big. He was a big dude, and he was trying to wrestle the service revolver from the cop who was called onto the scene by the convenience store manager, who said that Michael Brown was acting out and I think had stolen some shit from his convenience store. Never gets talked about. But they portrayed him as being young, right? So remember, Jupiter and Leo, youth, right? And then the next thing we run into is this Tamir Rice. The 12-year-old African-American boy is killed by a police officer in Cleveland. So it's another youth, right? So this is what Jupiter and Leo, at least that face of it during that time, is doing, right? They are beginning to exploit the so-called innocence of Black American youth who are killed at the hands of America's police officers, ultimately culminating in what? In the summer of George Floyd. So what's interesting about the summer of George Floyd is the astrological equation that goes along with it, right? So we're starting here with Jupiter and Leo in 2014. If we go to the summer of Floyd, Saturn is in Aquarius. So what do we have there, right? Astrologically, we have a Saturn in Aquarius opposition with Jupiter and Leo. So there's some of your astrological math, or how it gets worked out when Saturn went into Aquarius, right? And that was the culmination of what starts here with Jupiter and Leo. Now, we're not going to have that combination again, per se, right? But it's interesting to see how that like worked out during that time. And then again, it all culminates. Like, this is the beginning. This is the genesis. So I wanted to talk about Jupiter and Leo and youth. Because that's how it's getting worked out here, right? That's how it's getting worked out here. All right. So one of the things that occurred to me is what is it going to look like this summer with Jupiter and Leo and Uranus in Gemini, and including this Mars-Uranus conjunction. I feel like that's part of the Jupiter and Leo story, at least for this year, in that we're going to have a lot of young people on the streets in America. I can't speak to other countries, but if I can feel it, you can already see it, right? We saw some of this starting to happen kind of on spring break, post-spring break, like flash mobs, big time flash mobs. And it feels like that's going to be a part of the story with Jupiter and Leo And it could coincide also with the World Cup, right? Like depending upon who's in the finals with the World Cup and the victory of the world. Yeah, I just get flash mob, and I get young. Like this is where you're getting Gen A starting to really feel the ropes, and some Gen A will be just fine. They're young, responsible Pluto and Capricorn people that just want to start businesses and rule the world, right? But others are going to be fueled by something quite different. So I'll give you an example. Let's see, we got Pluto in Capricorn, 0 degrees. And then we have Saturn and Neptune. Okay. And I wanted to talk about this with Gen A when we were talking about them a little while ago. But that early group, right? That early group born like around 2009, 2010. So 2009, they're going to be 17 years old. 2010, roughly 16 years of age. And then you can get into that kind of weird in-between group, maybe 2008, 2009, 16, 17 years old. So they're starting to move into adulthood. Like the earliest, footprint of Gen A is starting to move into adulthood. They're going to be much more visible moving forward. But what we know about this group is that even like the tween periods, like the 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, they're really quite powerful, and they grow up very quickly. And these are the kids that we're going to see, I believe, on the streets of America this year. Now, how they comport themselves, that's going to be a whole other thing, right? Like, I was just going through this Terrion Arnold story. And I don't know if you guys know who Terrion Arnold is, but he's a cornerback. And he plays for the Detroit Lions, or he played. And it's a very weird story. And in the story, he winds up getting a bunch of his shit stolen from him at a Airbnb in Largo, Florida. And then what he does is he plans this kind of revenge plot to go after the people who theoretically stole his shit, $250,000 worth of shit, whatever. And he goes through this really elaborate kind of thing. Like, it's kind of mind-blowing what he does. He gets these, and I was kind of stunned when I heard the ages of the people that this guy wound up kidnapping and kind of beating them up because he thought that they stole his shit. And they were between 16 and 17 years old. And I thought to myself, oh, these are Gen A kids. What are they doing hanging out with like a 22, 23-year-old guy, maybe 24 max, who plays fucking pro football? Like, what's up with that? Right? And I'm like, well, that's a really interesting place for those kids to be in. And not a good one, by the way. Right? Not a good one. So it's not a commentary on all the Gen A kids, but I thought it was an interesting kind of slice of their generation, because now they're being talked about in relationship to this whole other story, right, with Terrion Arnold. If we look at Austin Metcalf and Carmelo Anthony, they are Gen A. Those are Gen A kids. They are not Gen Z kids. They're like right at the edge of Gen Z. We're going to call them Gen A. And maybe they're at the edge of Gen, maybe. But we're going to call them Gen A. So Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf become kind of emblematic of Gen A. So I feel like they're coming out somewhere. And we hope that it's not a replay of Michael Brown and Tamir Rice because we already started off with Carmelo Anthony, Austin Metcalf, Rick Chow, and I don't know the other kid's name. Apologize, but the kid that supposedly Rick Chow killed, what's his name? How do you spell Rick Chow? Rick Chow, not guilty. It was 4 weeks ago, and it was the death of Cyrus Carmack Belton, right? So we have, very similar story, right? Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, right? And then there's the not guilty. Boom. And then we have the Carmelo Anthony, Austin Metcalf. And again, not quite Michael Brown, but can you see the sequence? Are we running that playbook back with Jupiter and Leo? I sure as hell hope not. Right? I sure as hell hope we're not running that playbook back, because we're over it, man. We're over it. But that's the kind of exploitation that Jupiter and Leo allows for. It really can trade in emotional currency when it comes to young people and children. Let's talk about another element of this Jupiter and Leo transit that we're going to be in. And it feels to me like it's like this is where, again, the so-called elite, whatever you want to call them, begin to show their hand. Like, either they feel that it's time, hello, Jupiter-Pluto opposition, right? It is time to engage our energy and our force in order to transform the social condition, which is what we will get straight out of the gate with a Jupiter-Pluto opposition. Because Pluto being at 4 Aquarius right now, Jupiter's going to come slot right into that. Well, that would be your, so-called quote unquote elite energy, which would say, okay, it's time for us to engage. We need to transform the social structures, and we need to get involved. It's time for the quote unquote adults to enter the room, right? That to me is a component of this Jupiter and Leo, because that's who they are, right? They are theoretically they are the extension of the sun. They are the manifestation of the Sun King and the Sun Queen, right? Who by hierarchy and decree rule over everybody. That the sun rises and sets with them. Not just every day, but with their reign, right? And this is the solar tradition that the elites belong to. This is where we get into royalty. This is where we get into bloodlines. And with Jupiter and Leo, it's usually a sign that they are much more active. That's just the nature of it, right? They're more engaged, more involved. And why would they be that more engaged, more involved? Because they understand astrology. It's like this is literally their season in the sun with Jupiter and Leo. Now, the people that we see on the world stage, a lot of them are just puppets, right? They're the front people for the people that are actually behind the scenes, the ones who are really sort of the Jupiter and Leo cast, and that would be CASTE, cast. And so will these people begin to emerge from the shadows? Yes. But you may not realize who they are. Right? You may not realize who they are. There may be somebody who, this happens, right? They are sort of breathed into the collective. And all of a sudden we're dealing with, well, who is this person? And where did they come from? And, oh, their story seems really ordinary. Well, maybe their story's not so ordinary. And maybe they're actually extraordinary, but they're playing it out in a way where they look quite ordinary. And this will happen from time to time, right? They'll show up as kind of like some Joe Schmo. And, you're really dealing with like one of the richest motherfuckers on the planet. Either way, whether it's, the esoteric version or the exoteric version of that, Jupiter in Leo is, especially now, more about those persona, those people with those masks, those people that have been living off of those bloodlines for a very long period of time. They just become much more active with Jupiter and Leo. Now, on the other side of that equation, that's us, theoretically. Jupiter and Leo is about the blood and the energy and the source of all life, at least electrically and heat-wise, pumping through us. And even cosmically, the sun has a cosmic function. It's pumping through us, right? So it is a paradox in the sense that this energy that is connected to royalty and bloodline and monarchies, all those things, Jupiter and Leo makes it bigger. But it also makes it bigger with the quote-unquote common man, the plebe, the everyday person, the worker, right? That energy becomes big. And so for us, it's also an opportunity to inhale deeply and exhale deeply and live our lives with a deep sense of creative potential and fulfillment, right? It's also a time where, Jupiter-Pluto opposition, are the masses ever going to rise up? No, to be determined. But that said, with this Jupiter-Pluto opposition, the masses may not rise up, but the masses might start to remember who they are. Because last time we had Jupiter and Leo, it wasn't opposing Jupiter and Pluto, I can tell you that, or Pluto and Aquarius. Right now, it wasn't doing any of that. So this is a completely different iteration of Jupiter and Leo. Hell, we could go back to any number of Jupiter and Leo cycles. And the only time we're going to find one where it opposes Pluto in Aquarius is during the founding of this country. Right? And then any subsequent Jupiter cycles after that. That's the only time we'll find it. And this is the first Jupiter opposition to Pluto with this Pluto cycle. It's the inaugural opposition. So I think it's pretty interesting. And I think it's pretty important. And it gets back to where we started at the beginning of tonight's stream, podcast, whatever you want to call this, where people have had enough, right? They've had enough. We've had enough of this bullshit. Start living your lives that way. Just start living your life that way. You don't have to be indignant, right? You don't have to be arrogant. You don't have to be an asshole. And sometimes with Jupiter and Leo, you run that risk. You can kind of go a little too far. Maybe, you step into your ego a little bit much, but you can figure it out. You can tweak it, right? You can't know what is enough until you know what's more than enough. It's a very Jupiterian kind of maxim, by the way. And I really feel like this Jupiter cycle, especially with this fire horse, and we got Jupiter and Leo, right? And Jupiter represents Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is the, it's the horse, right? I just feel like there's this lifeblood, this life force that is pumping back into our world, right? It's pumping back into our world. And you have the option. You have the option of going through the motions and doing whatever it is you do just to get by on a daily basis, right? You don't want to go too high or too low. You don't want to be dealing with chaos or collapse. I totally get it. I understand it. I think a conservative approach generally is a good approach, especially in weird economic times. But that said, right, how many more days in the sun do we have? I asked you that question rhetorically. How many more days in the sun do we have? We don't know. So I say to you, enjoy them. Get into it. Find the energy. Now, we may have thousands of days in the sun. We may have a year. When this thing goes into Jupiter and Virgo, who knows what happens, right? There's a huge contraction. Or maybe it's more about like adjusting, adapting, improving upon the creative model, right? Which is Virgo is good for that. It's called editing. Take advantage of it. That's what I'm saying. Right? Live. Live to your fullest potential. Take a big bite out of life. Enjoy it. Create. Love. This is what our world needs. And if you do it in the right spirit, guess what? It spreads. And people begin to reflect it back. And if they don't reflect it back, it's okay. It's really okay. Just keep doing your thing. Keep living your life. Keep blazing your inner sun. And I'm not sure how much more I have to add to this. This is what astrology is about. And we've got a really, really interesting catalyst with this Mars and Uranus sextile to Jupiter. Shake off the old, bring in the new, celebrate it, right? Celebrate it. Make it a part of who you are. Integrate it. And let's let the rest take care of itself. This is what we have to do. I mean, what else are we going to do, right? Are we going to start a third party? Are we going to march on Washington, D.C.? Are we going to take down the government? Evil bastards. The more that you are invested in your creative spirit, the more that you're willing to love, the more that you're willing to share that with another person, right? In a very unconditional way, right? Those are the blows against the system that they have absolutely no answer for whatsoever. None. And that's ultimately what they hate. They don't want to see us get along. They don't want to see us help each other out. They don't want to see us connect to the heart, right, in a way that is meaningful and not just, set up to look a particular way for individual groups. That's not what they want. They want us divided. They want us fighting. They want us at each other's throats. And Jupiter in Leo says enough of that, right? There's plenty there's plenty here on the table, right? We'll take it from here. Anyway, I hope you found that to be somewhat inspiring, because that's what it was meant to be. We don't get these shots often with transits like this, right? And that opposition with Pluto is really interesting. And I really do feel like if enough of us ignite, we do have the opportunity to, I wouldn't necessarily say change the collective overnight, but it sends waves through it. And those waves mean something. And I've always felt this. When you do something in your life, whatever it is, let's say it's an obligation that you meet and you meet it well, or let's say it's something that you do or give and it's unconditional and it assists somebody, it helps another person. Let's say it's something that you have worked hard at and you've accomplished it and you've brought it to a place where you can share it with the rest of the world, whether it's a book or a recipe or a house or whatever that thing is. All those things count. They all matter, right? They all matter. Because number one, they go into a greater sea of resonant field, right? We are feeding this resonant field with our conscious awareness. We're feeding it with our ability to achieve, our ability to complete projects, and our ability to act from a place of integrity. It all goes into that place, right? And it's in that place that resonant field can act as the stage for whatever turn of consciousness we're moving towards. Not only that, but when you do it on a personal level, it has a downstream effect with another person. You can inspire another person. You can give a person a sense of gratitude. You can give them a sense of possibility, right? And that's Jupiter and Leo. And I love the fact that we have Saturn in Aries, right? Because Saturn and Aries can really ground that. Like Jupiter's coming out, it's going to start to trine Aries. Certainly it's going to trine Neptune. You're going to do that Jupiter-Neptune trine, and that's where the inspiration comes from, right? That's where the sense of art and creativity really comes from. It's a beautiful trine, right? And and that's part of the collective as well. It's a sense of feeling alive and feeling connected to something higher than yourself. That's the nature of Jupiter and Neptune. And the Saturn trine grounds it. So these are really, really interesting transits that we're going through. And it's really started to pick up and heat up with Jupiter and Cancer. And heat up in the sense from a feeling place, right? Like that, all that World Cup stuff. It's like, hey, look at this. This feels great, doesn't it? Yeah. It's the precursor. Anyway, don't sleep on it. Don't sleep on this energy. And at the end of the day, like, do we want to have a sense of authority and autonomy and to some degree, whatever it is, sovereignty? Yes, most of us do. It takes responsibility for that, but it also takes fuel, and it takes enthusiasm, and it takes passion. So there you go. We have some interesting days ahead of us. Don't forget, you can go over to Locals and you can sign up for Locals, and we'll be doing a every other Monday dive into astrology primer, and it'll be good to get back in Locals. And I think that's it. I've talked a lot. I've said a lot, and I hope some of it stuck to your cell somewhere along the way. All right, I'm out of here. I'll be back on Tuesday with the Astro Weather. Thanks for being here. Carpe diem. Seize the day. I'll leave you with that. Much love to you all. God bless. Treat each other well. Bye for now. Robert Phoenix signing off.